Alaska's capital city is facing an unprecedented crisis. Juneau is bracing for what could be the most devastating natural disaster in the city's recent history, a catastrophic glacial lake outburst flood that threatens to break all previous records and destroy hundreds of homes. This isn't your typical flood from heavy rainfall. This is
breaking news. Alaska faces imminent disaster as a glacier lake outburst threatens Juneau with catastrophic flooding. Alaska Governor Dunleavy issued a disaster declaration after monitoring signals and imminent release from Suicide Basin, a side of Mendenhall Glacier. The volume of water has hit record levels and a flood could strike any moment, possibly affecting nearby neighborhoods and the river systems. Last year's Glacial caused massive damage, ripping homes apart and flooding entire communities. Despite flood control barriers, the risk remains high. Experts warn the threat is real and time is running out. Will this be Juneau's worst flood yet?
something far more dangerous and unpredictable than typical flooding. Governor Mike Dunleavy has issued a disaster declaration in response to what officials are calling an imminent threat of catastrophic flooding. The source of this looming disaster? A phenomenon that sounds like something out of a disaster movie, Suicide Basin, a glacial lake sitting precariously above the Mendenhall Glacier, has reached its breaking point. To understand why this is so terrifying, we need to understand what makes glacial lake outburst floods so uniquely destructive. Unlike regular floods that build up gradually from storms, glacial outburst floods unleash billions of gallons of water in a matter of hours. Picture a massive natural dam made of ice, suddenly giving way, sending a wall of water and debris racing down mountain valleys at incredible speeds. Suicide Basin isn't just any glacial lake. It's a ticking time bomb that's been growing more dangerous each year. The basin was formed when Suicide Glacier retreated, leaving behind a bowl-shaped depression that now fills with rainwater and snowmelt every summer. The Mendenhall Glacier acts as a massive ice dam, holding back this growing reservoir of water. But here's what makes this situation so precarious. The basin has been filling at an alarming rate, as much as 4 feet per day during especially sunny or rainy periods. Hydrologic monitoring by the National Weather Service and U.S. Geological Survey confirms that the volume of water currently trapped in Suicide Basin has reached or exceeded levels observed during previous record-breaking flood events. The numbers are staggering. Water levels in the Mendenhall River are expected to reach between 16.3 and 16.8 feet, potentially setting a new all-time record. To put this in perspective, major flooding begins at 14 feet. The previous record was 16 feet. Weather Service meteorologist Nicole Farron stated bluntly, "This will be a new record based on all of the information that we have." What makes this flood even more terrifying is its unpredictability. The release mechanism happens beneath hundreds of feet of glacier ice, completely invisible to observers above. Scientists can monitor the water level in the basin, but they can't see exactly when or how the ice dam will fail. The water pressure builds until it finds a way under or around the glacier, often through channels that form and collapse unpredictably. The timing has emergency officials on edge. The USGS web camera and laser gauge in Suicide Basin showed clear indications that the ice dam was being overtopped, with icebergs being pulled toward the overflow channel. Once overtopping begins, historical data suggests the outburst flood typically occurs within 6 days. That countdown began on Sunday, August 10th. Juneau residents know this threat all too well. This annual disaster has been terrorizing the community since 2011, but it's been getting progressively worse. In 2023, homes were literally washed away as residents watched in horror. Last year's flood was even more devastating. Nearly 300 homes were impacted by unprecedented flooding that caused widespread damage to homes, public infrastructure, and utilities.
In Alaska, the Mendenhall Glacier traps billions of gallons of water in Suicide Basin. Every year, this icy dam bursts, sending a wall of water surging downstream. Last year, the flood hit record levels, damaging nearly 300 homes. And this year, experts say it could be even bigger, with water rising over 16 feet. Picture 23,000 Olympic swimming pools racing through rivers, half the flow of Niagara Falls. The city scrambled, building a 2.5-mile-long temporary levee made of 10,000 barriers to hold back the flood. But the glacier will keep melting and blocking the basin for decades. How long can we fight?
The destruction from these floods is heartbreaking and swift. Video from previous years shows towering trees behind homes falling into the rushing Mendenhall River as the water eats away at riverbanks. Eventually, entire homes teetering at the edge collapse into the raging torrent. Families have lost everything in a matter of hours, but this year, authorities are taking unprecedented steps to protect the community. Unlike previous years where they could only respond after the disaster struck, officials are positioning resources in advance.
We are partnering with the Red Cross to set up an emergency evacuation shelter at Floyd Dryden Gymnasium. Again, we just really encourage everybody to sign up for emergency alerts. As we've heard from the National Weather Service, these events can become dynamic, and as we receive updated information, we'll be pushing those out through our Alert Sense opt-in app. Our number one priority for this response is the protection of life and safety.
Governor Mike Dunleavy issued a state disaster declaration yesterday, allowing resources to be mobilized before the flooding. The State Department of Transportation is also monitoring bridges and pathways in the area and says that they do not anticipate any changes to the ferry system at this.
The Alaska State Emergency Operations Center has been activated to coordinate interagency response, emergency permitting, public messaging, and preparations for protective actions. The most visible sign of these preparations are the HESCO barriers, military-grade flood barriers that line the Mendenhall River through the most vulnerable neighborhoods. These barriers, recommended by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, are designed to protect neighborhoods completely up to an 18-foot flood level. City Manager Katie Kuster expressed cautious optimism. The HESCO barriers are in place, and we believe they will perform as designed. However, the scale of the threat has forced authorities to issue evacuation alerts covering more than 1,000 residents and businesses. Emergency text alerts have been sent to all cell phones in the Juneau area, warning people to finalize evacuation plans and pack emergency bags. An emergency evacuation shelter has been set up at Floyd Dryden Middle School. The geographic reality of this disaster makes it even more challenging. The flooding originates high in the mountains above Juneau, in a basin that most residents never see, but the water's path takes it directly through the Mendenhall Valley, where most of Juneau's population lives. There's no way to divert or stop the flood once it begins. The community can only prepare and hope their defenses hold. What makes Suicide Basin unique among Alaska's many glacial lakes is its proximity to a major population center. University of Alaska Southeast environmental science professor Erin Hood explained the rarity of the situation. This is kind of like the one place in Alaska that there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure and a large basin going into a river. The phenomenon was first discovered in 2011 when Professor Hood was called to investigate mysterious flooding on what should have been a clear, sunny day. Flying over the glacier in a helicopter, he discovered collapsed ice and stranded icebergs in the basin, the first signs of what would become an annual threat to thousands of residents. Scientists have been studying this phenomenon intensively, but many questions remain unanswered. The buoyancy of ice and hydrostatic pressure affect the release in ways that are difficult to predict because what's happening on the underside of the glacier can't be observed. As flood forecaster Aaron Jacobs admitted, we don't quite understand that, the whole triggering aspect. We're just using the past to understand what we can see in the future. The broader context makes this situation even more ominous. Alaska's glaciers are rapidly receding due to climate change, and this retreat is...
Okay, so we have an urgent information coming out. Landslide triggers tsunami in southeast Alaska, August 10th, 2025. Multiple reports confirm that a landslide triggered a local tsunami in southeast Alaska. Endicott armed just after 5:30 a.m. on August 10, 2025, and based on seismic signals and eyewitness account, the Alaska Earthquake Center stated that a significant landslide, potentially involving tens of millions of cubic meters of rock, caused a local tsunami with waves reportedly reaching 10 to 15 feet in height. While the exact location of the landslide is still being confirmed, kayakers camping on Harbor Island in Tracing Arm Inlet, about 45 miles south of Juneau, reported being affected by the surge, which swept away a significant portion of their gear,
creating new hazards that communities must confront. Just this morning, a massive landslide involving tens of millions of cubic meters of rock crashed into Endicott Arm, generating a local tsunami with waves reaching 10 to 15 feet in height. As glaciers melt and retreat, they're leaving behind unstable geological formations and new water bodies that didn't exist before. If current trends continue, 200 named Alaska glaciers could disappear by the end of this century. This retreat is creating a cascading series of new risks. Local officials are already looking beyond Suicide Basin, recognizing that other dangerous basins could form as the Mendenhall Glacier continues to retreat. Assistant City Manager Robert B.A. R. warned there very well could be other basins behind Suicide that will form as Mendenhall Glacier retreats. The economic impact of these recurring floods is staggering. The 2024 flood alone resulted in state and federal disaster declarations. Insurance claims, infrastructure repairs, and economic disruption cost millions of dollars. But the human cost is even higher. Families displaced, communities traumatized, and an entire city living under the constant threat of natural disaster. What makes this year's situation particularly tense is the combination of factors that could make the flooding even worse than previous years. Recent rainfall has already pushed the Mendenhall River into minor flood stage before the glacial outburst even begins. This means the river system is already stressed and has less capacity to handle the incoming surge of glacial water. The monitoring technology deployed around Suicide Basin represents some of the most advanced flood prediction systems in the world.
Aerial view of southeast Alaska at dawn, showing icy fjords and calm waters near Endicott Arm. Map animation highlighting Endicott Arm near Juneau with seismic wave markers and a red alert circle. Visualization of a landslide falling into water, creating a 1-foot tsunami wave. Footage or animation of the Barry Arm Glacier with labeled glaciers and warning signs. Scientists in lab or field with seismic monitoring equipment. Map of southern Alaska with seismic monitoring zones expanding. Post-event image of the water near Juneau. Subscribe for real.
Scientists are monitoring every possible indicator. Satellite cameras, laser gauges, GPS units, measuring ice velocity, and multiple river monitoring stations provide real-time data to scientists and emergency managers. But even with all this technology, the fundamental unpredictability of glacial processes means exact timing and magnitude remain uncertain until the flood actually begins. The community response has been remarkable. Despite the terror of facing potential disaster, Juneau residents have shown incredible resilience and preparation. Families are rehearsing evacuation scenarios, businesses are moving valuable inventory to higher ground, and neighbors are helping each other prepare for the worst. Local authorities have learned hard lessons from previous floods and are applying them this year. The proactive disaster declaration allows state resources to be positioned before the emergency occurs, rather than scrambling to respond afterward. Emergency communication systems have been tested and improved, evacuation routes have been clearly marked and practiced. But perhaps most importantly, the community has developed a culture of preparedness that didn't exist when the first flood struck in 2011. Residents now know the warning signs, understand evacuation procedures, and have emergency supplies ready. This cultural shift could be the difference between a manageable disaster and a complete catastrophe. The HESCO barriers represent the largest flood mitigation project in Juneau's history. These military-grade barriers were specifically designed to handle the unique challenges of glacial outburst flooding, the rapid rise of water levels, the debris carried by the flood, and the unpredictable nature of the surge. If they work as designed, they could save hundreds of homes and businesses. However, emergency officials are planning for multiple scenarios. While they're optimistic about the barrier's performance, they recognize that this could be the largest flood on record. Emergency Manager Ryan O'Shaughnessy emphasized that their job is to plan for every scenario, especially in the face of what could be another historic flood event. The scientific community is watching this event closely, not just for its immediate impact on Juneau, but for what it reveals about glacial processes and flood prediction in a changing climate. The data collected during this flood will inform flood management strategies around the world as glacial lake outburst floods become more common due to climate change. Universities, government agencies, and international researchers have been collaborating to understand not just when these floods occur, but why they're becoming more frequent and severe. The research involves cutting-edge technology including LiDAR, radar measurements of ice thickness, drone surveys, and satellite imagery analysis. As Juneau waits for the inevitable flood, the city represents a microcosm of climate adaptation challenges facing communities worldwide. Rising temperatures are creating new natural hazards that communities must learn to live with. The question isn't whether these floods will continue, they will, but whether human communities can adapt quickly enough to minimize the damage. The current situation in Juneau is a preview of challenges that other communities around the world will face as climate change accelerates. Glacial lake outburst floods are becoming more common in mountain regions globally, from the Himalayas to the Andes to Alaska. The lessons learned in Juneau could help save lives and property in dozens of other vulnerable locations. For now, all eyes are on Suicide Basin and the Mendenhall River. Weather forecasters are updating their predictions hourly as new data comes in. Emergency responders are positioned and ready. Residents are prepared to evacuate at a moment's notice, and scientists are gathering data that could help predict and prepare for future disasters. The next few days will determine whether Juneau's preparations are sufficient to handle what could be the most severe natural disaster in the city's recent history. The stakes couldn't be higher, not just for the thousands of residents in the flood zone, but for communities around the world facing similar climate-driven hazards. This is more than just a local weather event. It's a glimpse into the future of natural disasters in a changing climate, where communities must learn to live with new and unpredictable threats. Juneau's response to this crisis could serve as a model for climate adaptation, or a warning about the challenges ahead. The countdown has begun. Suicide Basin is full, the ice dam is failing, and Alaska's capital city is bracing for impact. What happens next will be determined by the forces of nature, human preparation, and the resilience of a community that has learned to live with an annual threat that could destroy everything they've built.